When my brother attacked my daughter and mocked our lives, his regret came fast. I am Harper, 38 years old, and that Saturday evening at my parents' 65th anniversary dinner, I watched my brother Callum corner my 15-year-old daughter Rowan against the wall. His face was red with wine and rage as he grabbed her shoulders, shaking her hard enough that her head snapped back. You think you're smart, don't you? Just like your pathetic mother. Always acting superior when you're nothing but trailer trash playing dress-up. The entire family froze, fork suspended mid-air, as he shoved Rowan so violently she stumbled and fell, her dress tearing as she hit the marble floor. My mother gasped, but no one moved to help her. Callum stood over my daughter, a sick smile spreading across his privileged face as he surveyed the room. What? Someone needs to tell them the truth. He turned to face the assembled relatives, our successful cousins and their perfect families, enjoying his moment in the spotlight. My dear sister here thinks because she got some Mickey Mouse law degree from a community college that she's one of us now. Newsflash, Harper, we all know you're still that broke single mom who shops at Goodwill. Your kid's wearing my wife's hand-me-downs from 3 seasons ago. He laughed, and several relatives had the decency to look uncomfortable, but still, no one spoke. I stood slowly from my chair, smoothing my dress, actually a designer piece I'd bought new last month, and reached into my purse. I pulled out a sealed envelope and placed it carefully on the table in front of my plate, saying nothing, just a small smile. My relationship with Callum had always been complicated by his position as the golden child and my role as the family disappointment. When our father built his commercial real estate empire, Callum inherited the expectation of joining the business while I was actively discouraged from pursuing anything beyond secretarial school. I defied them, working 3 jobs to put myself through law school at night, raising Rowan alone after her father abandoned us when I was 23. Callum, meanwhile, glided through an Ivy League MBA on family money and stepped directly into a VP position at our father's company. What Callum didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't been working as a small-time contract lawyer like they assumed. For the past 6 years, I'd been a senior corporate attorney specializing in forensic investigation and white-collar crime. And 3 months ago, one of my firm's biggest clients had asked me to investigate suspicious activity in a company they were considering acquiring. That company's CFO was named Callum. I helped Rowan to her feet, checking her arm where it would bruise, meeting her eyes with a calm that seemed to reassure her despite the tears streaming down her face. My mother finally found her voice. Harper, surely you're not going to make a scene over a little family disagreement. You know how Callum gets when he's had wine. He didn't mean anything by it. I turned to look at her, this woman who had spent 38 years making excuses for my brother's cruelty, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Actually, Mother, I think Callum meant every word, and I think it's time we all stopped pretending otherwise. Callum laughed again, that braying sound that had punctuated my childhood humiliations. Oh, here we go. The victim act. What are you going to do, Harper? Sue me? Take me to your little community college court? He grabbed his wine glass and raised it in a mock toast. To my sister, ladies and gentlemen, who actually believed she could escape where she came from. Guess what, sis? You can't polish a turd. My father's silence cut deeper than Callum's words. He sat at the head of the table, the patriarch who had built a fortune worth hundreds of millions. And he said nothing as his son physically assaulted his granddaughter. His eyes met mine briefly, then slid away, choosing as he always had. I filed that moment away. Another piece of evidence in the case I was building, not in court, but in the court of family opinion that mattered so much to these people. Rowan, sweetheart, go wait in the car, I said quietly, handing her my keys. She nodded, still crying, and I watched as she walked past her grandmother, her grandfather, her uncle, and all those relatives who had witnessed her assault and done nothing. When the front door closed behind her, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Callum. I'm curious, I said, my voice conversational. When you embezzled $2 million from the Harrison account last year, did you really think no one would notice? Or when you falsified the environmental impact reports for the Riverside development, did you consider that the EPA might eventually find out? Or how about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? Did you seriously believe those would stay hidden forever? The color drained from Callum's face. Around the table, confusion rippled through the guests. My father's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly sharp and focused in a way I hadn't seen him look at me in years. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish. What are you talking about? Callum's voice had lost its mocking edge, replaced by something higher, tighter. You're making things up too. The Harrison account alone is federal wire fraud, I continued, pulling my phone from my purse and scrolling through emails as casually as if I were checking the weather. The environmental violations carry criminal charges and civil penalties that would bankrupt the company. And the offshore accounts, well, the IRS gets very interested in unreported foreign income, especially when it's in the millions. But I'm sure you already knew all that. My father stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Harper, what is this? What are you saying? I met his eyes steadily, seeing for the first time not the intimidating patriarch, but a man who had chosen wrong so many times that he'd forgotten what right looked like. I'm saying that the company you're about to sell to Meridian Holdings for $400 million is currently under investigation for massive financial fraud. I'm saying that your golden boy has been systematically stealing from your clients and covering it up with falsified documents. And I'm saying that I've spent the last 3 months documenting every single transaction, every forged signature, every illegal transfer. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm the lead investigator on Meridian's due diligence team, Dad. They hired my firm specifically because we're the best at finding exactly what Callum has been hiding. The silence that followed was profound. Callum's wife, Jessica, stood abruptly, her chair falling backward. Callum? What is she talking about? Tell them she's lying. But Callum couldn't speak. He was staring at that envelope on the table, the one I'd placed there so carefully, and I could see his mind racing, calculating, trying to find a way out. There wasn't one. I'd made sure of that. The envelope contains a summary of findings, I explained to my father, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 5 minutes. I've already submitted the full report to Meridian Holdings. They've withdrawn their offer, obviously. I imagine the board will be calling you for an emergency meeting on Monday morning. I picked up my purse, smoothed my dress one more time. I'm also filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association regarding Callum's fraudulent legal representations, and I forwarded all evidence to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. You? Callum finally found his voice, strangled and desperate. You can't do this. I'm your brother. This is family business. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. You're right, Callum. Family is important. That's why I spent months building an absolutely airtight case against you. I wanted to make sure you'd face real consequences for the first time in your privileged life. I looked at my mother, who was crying now, and my father, whose face had gone gray. You all made your choices tonight. You watched him attack my daughter, mock everything I've built, and you said nothing. Well, I'm saying something now. As I reached for the door handle, Callum lunged forward, desperation making him stupid. Wait, Harper, please, we can work this out. I'll apologize to Rowan. The FBI will be at your office Monday morning, I said, cutting him off. I'd suggest you hire a good criminal defense attorney. Not me, obviously. I opened the door and stepped into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I heard my mother wailing, my father demanding answers, Callum's wife screaming accusations. The sound of my family imploding followed me to my car where Rowan waited, her young face already showing the bruising that would bloom purple by morning. I slid into the driver's seat and reached for her hand. Are they going to be okay? She asked, her voice small. I started the engine. That's not our problem anymore, baby. The drive home was silent except for Rowan's occasional sniffles. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, watching the bruise spread across her shoulder where Callum had grabbed her. Every mark fueled the cold certainty that I'd made exactly the right choice. By the time we pulled into our driveway, my phone had already started buzzing with messages I had no intention of reading. Inside our house, not a trailer, not an apartment, but the 3-bedroom colonial I'd purchased 2 years ago with money I'd earned through brutal work and smarter investments than my brother ever managed. I helped Rowan into comfortable clothes and made her tea. She sat at the kitchen table, looking younger than 15, and asked the question I'd been dreading. What's going to happen to Uncle Callum? I set the mug in front of her and sat down. He's going to face consequences for stealing money and breaking laws. That's what happens when people do bad things. But he's family. Family doesn't give you permission to hurt people. I reached across and gently touched the darkening bruise on her shoulder. He put his hands on you. He's been stealing from people for years. Those are choices he made, and now he has to face what comes from those choices. My phone rang. My father. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined again. Then a text appeared. Harper, we need to talk about this. You're destroying the family business over a misunderstanding. I stared at the words, feeling something almost like amusement. A misunderstanding. As if $3 million in embezzlement was a simple accounting error. As if assaulting a child was a communication problem. Another text came through, this one from my mother. How could you do this to your brother? After everything we've given you. I showed Rowan the message. Everything they've given me, I repeated softly. Want to know what they gave me, baby? Student loan debt that took me 12 years to pay off. A childhood of being told I'd never amount to anything. A family that watched you get hurt tonight and blamed me for making a scene. I deleted the message. Some gifts aren't worth keeping. The weekend passed in a strange calm before the storm I knew was building. I'd turned off my phone after the 50th message Friday night, but I checked my work email on Sunday evening and found exactly what I'd expected. An urgent message from Meridian Holdings CEO, confirming they'd received my full investigative report and thanking me for the thorough work that had saved them from a catastrophically bad acquisition. Attached was a bonus check authorization for $250,000. I printed it out and left it on the kitchen counter where Rowan would see it Monday morning. Let her understand that doing the right thing, even when it cost you everything, sometimes pays dividends that matter. Monday morning arrived with a phone call at 6 a.m. from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miss Harper? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. This is Special Agent Chen with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to schedule an interview regarding the evidence you submitted concerning Callum's fraudulent activities. I'd been expecting this call, had prepared for it, but hearing it still sent a small thrill through me. Of course. When would you like to meet? This afternoon, if possible. We're executing a search warrant at his office this morning and would like your statement before we proceed with formal charges. After we scheduled the meeting, I made breakfast for Rowan, watching her carefully as she processed everything happening around us. She was quiet, pensive. But when she finally spoke, what she said surprised me. Mom, Uncle Callum said you went to a Mickey Mouse law school. But that's not true, is it? I smiled. I went to Metro State at night while working full-time and taking care of you. It's not Harvard, but it's a fully accredited law school, and I graduated third in my class. The real education came from the years I spent clawing my way up in a profession that didn't want women like me, women who couldn't afford the right connections or the unpaid internships at prestigious firms. He made it sound like you were nothing. He needed to believe that. It's easier to be cruel to people you've convinced yourself are beneath you. I poured orange juice into her glass. But the beautiful thing about the law is that it doesn't care where you went to school or who your family is. Evidence is evidence. Fraud is fraud. And right now, all of Callum's expensive education and family connections can't save him from the fact that he committed multiple felonies. My phone, the work phone I'd reluctantly turned back on, buzzed with a message from my senior partner. Board meeting at our father's company has been called for 10 a.m. Multiple board members requesting emergency session. Thought you'd want to know the chaos has officially begun? I checked the time. 3 hours until Callum's world started its very public collapse. The doorbell rang at 7:30, unusual for a Monday morning. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica, Callum's wife, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, her makeup smeared from crying. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity won. Harper, please. She was sobbing, her composure completely shattered. Please. You have to stop this. Callum made mistakes, yes, but you're going to destroy everything. Our children, our life, everything. I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me so Rowan wouldn't have to hear this. Your husband stole millions of dollars, Jessica. He falsified environmental reports that could have poisoned an entire watershed. He assaulted my daughter in front of 20 witnesses. He was drunk. He meant every word. I kept my voice level, calm. And you know what? Even if he didn't mean it, it doesn't matter. The money he stole, the laws he broke, those aren't things you can apologize away. But the FBI, criminal charges, Harper, he could go to prison for years. Our kids will grow up without a father. I thought about all the nights Rowan had grown up without a father, because hers couldn't be bothered to stick around. I thought about working 3 jobs while studying for the bar exam, surviving on 4 hours of sleep, missing her school plays because I couldn't afford to take time off. I thought about Callum's mocking laughter, his casual cruelty, the bruise blooming purple on my daughter's shoulder. Your children will learn a valuable lesson, I said, that actions have consequences, even for people like Callum. Jessica's face hardened then, grief transforming into something uglier. You've always been jealous of him, of us. Of everything we had, I corrected gently. Everything you had, most of which was stolen, apparently. She slapped me. The crack was sharp in the morning air, and for a moment we both stood frozen, shocked. Then Jessica seemed to crumble, backing away with her hand over her mouth. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, oh God, I'm turning into him. I touched my stinging cheek, surprised to find I felt no anger, only a distant pity. You should go home, Jessica. Get a good divorce attorney. You're going to need one. As she stumbled back to her car, I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watching from her window. She'd witnessed the slap, would probably tell everyone at her book club about the drama at the Harper house. I waved to her cheerfully and went back inside. Rowan was standing in the hallway, her backpack already on. Was that Aunt Jessica? Yes. Is she okay? I grabbed my briefcase, checking that I had all the documents I'd need for my meeting with Agent Chen. She's dealing with the consequences of the life she chose, just like everyone else in this situation. At 9:45 a.m., I sat in my car in the FBI field office parking lot, watching the news alert pop up on my phone. Prominent developers company under federal investigation for fraud. The article was brief, lacking details, but it confirmed that search warrants had been executed at my father's company headquarters and at Callum's home office. My phone rang. My father, again. This time, I answered. Harper, what have you done? His voice was hollow, broken in a way I'd never heard. The FBI is seizing files. The board is talking about forcing me out. 50 years of building this company, and you've destroyed it in one weekend. I didn't destroy it, Dad. Callum did. I just documented it. He's your brother. He assaulted your granddaughter, I said, my voice sharp for the first time. And you sat there. You watched it happen, and you said nothing. You chose him over us, over what's right. Just like you always have. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, this will bankrupt us. Everything I've built. Your mother's lifestyle, the family foundation, all of it. Then you should have raised a son who didn't steal millions of dollars. I ended the call. Agent Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She led me to a conference room where another agent and a federal prosecutor were waiting. For 3 hours, I walked them through every piece of evidence I'd compiled: the forged signatures, the offshore transfers, the environmental violations, the pattern of theft that stretched back 7 years. "This is extraordinary work," the prosecutor said finally, reviewing the documentation I'd organized into clear, irrefutable timelines. "Most corporate fraud cases take us months to build. You've essentially handed us a complete prosecution." "I'm good at my job," I said simply. Agent Chen leaned forward. "Miss Harper, I have to ask. Your brother physically assaulted your daughter at a family dinner, and within hours you'd submitted this report to both his company's potential buyer and to federal authorities. The timing suggests you'd been holding on to this information, waiting for the right moment to deploy it." I met her gaze steadily. "I submitted my investigative findings to my client, Meridian Holdings, as soon as my work was complete. That happened to be Friday afternoon. The assault happened Friday evening. The timing was coincidental, but you didn't immediately report the assault to local police. My daughter was traumatized. I prioritized getting her home and safe. I'm filing a police report this afternoon." The prosecutor smiled slightly, recognizing the careful way I'd threaded the needle between personal revenge and professional duty. "Well, regardless of timing, this gives us everything we need. We'll be filing formal charges by end of week." As I stood to leave, Agent Chen stopped me. "Off the record, I have a daughter. If someone laid hands on her the way your brother did to yours, I'd want to do exactly what you did. But I'd probably have done it with a baseball bat instead of a federal investigation. The law is a better weapon," I said. "It doesn't leave bruises that heal." Tuesday morning brought the headlines I'd been anticipating. Real estate heir charged with embezzlement and fraud. FBI investigation expands to include company founder. My father's name appeared in print alongside Callum's, not as a perpetrator, but as someone who'd potentially enabled the fraud through willful negligence. The board had suspended both of them pending the investigation's outcome. I was reviewing the articles over coffee when Rowan came downstairs, her bruise now a spectacular purple and yellow that made my jaw tighten every time I looked at it. She'd refused to cover it with makeup for school, and I understood why. She wanted people to see what Callum had done. "Mom, there are reporters outside." I glanced out the window. 3 news vans had parked along our quiet street, cameras already positioned. Mrs. Patterson was probably having the time of her life. "Don't talk to them," I instructed. "I'll drive you to school through the back way." But at school, the circus continued. Other parents had seen the news, and by lunchtime, the principal called asking if Rowan needed counseling services. "The assault of a child by a family member is traumatic," she said carefully over the phone. "We want to make sure Rowan has support." "She has my support," I replied. "And her uncle is facing federal charges. That's all the support she needs." What I didn't tell the principal was that I'd spent Monday evening filing a civil lawsuit against Callum for assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and several other torts that would ensure, even if he somehow avoided prison, he'd spend the rest of his life paying for what he'd done. The damages I was seeking weren't modest, $5 million. An amount calculated to strip away everything he had left after the criminal penalties. My law firm's senior partner, Marcus, called me into his office Tuesday afternoon. He was 60, silver-haired, and had personally recruited me from a smaller firm 5 years ago, after seeing me eviscerate opposing counsel in a deposition. "Harper, we need to discuss the optics of this situation." I sat across from his massive desk, my expression neutral. "What optics? You investigated your own brother. That's going to raise questions about objectivity, about whether you had a conflict of interest that should have been disclosed." "I investigated the CFO of a company our client was acquiring," I corrected. "The fact that he's my brother is irrelevant to the validity of the evidence. Unless you're suggesting I fabricated the forged signatures and offshore accounts?" Marcus held up his hands. "Of course not. The work is impeccable as always, but the media is going to spin this as a family vendetta. Let them." I leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, you hired me because I'm thorough, because I find things other investigators miss, and because I don't let personal relationships cloud my professional judgment. That's exactly what I did here. If Callum wanted to avoid prosecution, he shouldn't have committed multiple felonies." "Fair enough." He studied me for a long moment. "The bonus from Meridian has been approved, by the way. $250,000 as requested. You've also received 3 new client inquiries specifically asking for you by name. Apparently, word has spread about your investigative skills." I allowed myself a small smile. "Good. I'll need the work to pay for Rowan's college fund. Private school is expensive." Back home that evening, I found my mother sitting on my porch steps. She looked diminished somehow, smaller than I'd ever seen her. The perfectly styled hair was limp, her designer clothes wrinkled. She'd been crying. "Harper, please, let me come inside. We need to talk." I unlocked the door but didn't invite her in. She followed anyway, settling into my living room like a ghost of the imposing woman who dominated my childhood. Rowan appeared in the hallway, saw her grandmother, and retreated silently to her room. That stung my mother. I could see it in her flinch. "Your father had a heart attack this morning," she said without preamble. I felt my stomach drop, a complex mix of concern and something harder, colder. "Is he alive?" "Yes, mild. The stress, the investigation, watching everything collapse. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Are you happy now? You've destroyed our family. I didn't destroy anything, Mother. I documented crimes. There's a difference. Callum made mistakes. Stop. I held up a hand. Stop calling them mistakes. Mistakes are when you forget to buy milk at the store. Callum systematically stole $3 million. He falsified environmental reports that could have poisoned groundwater for thousands of people. He assaulted a 15-year-old girl. Those aren't mistakes, they're crimes, and he knew exactly what he was doing when he committed them. My mother's face crumpled. He's going to prison, Harper. My son is going to prison, and your father might lose the company, might lose everything. The house is mortgaged, did you know that? We've been living beyond our means for years, and now you're facing the consequences of choices you made. I sat down across from her, maintaining distance. You mortgaged your house to maintain appearances. You enabled Callum's behavior for 38 years. You sat at that dinner table and watched him attack Rowan, and your biggest concern was that I might make a scene. I didn't know what to do. It happened so fast. It took him 5 full minutes to corner her, grab her, shake her, shove her to the ground, and stand there mocking us both. That's not fast, Mother. That's slow enough that any decent person would have intervened. She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I should have stopped him. I should have defended Rowan. Is that what you need to hear to end this nightmare? I don't need anything from you. I stood, signaling the conversation was over. What I need is for Rowan to grow up understanding that family isn't a shield for bad behavior, that being rich doesn't exempt you from consequences, that the law applies equally, even to golden boys with Ivy League degrees. So this is about revenge? About punishing us for favoring Callum all these years? I walked to the door and opened it. This is about justice. And if you can't tell the difference, that explains a lot about how we got here. After she left, Rowan emerged from her room. Grandpa had a heart attack? A mild one. He'll recover. Do you feel bad? I considered lying, offering her the comfortable fiction that I was torn up inside. But I'd promised myself years ago that I'd never teach my daughter the kind of dishonesty my family had mastered. No, baby. I feel sad that it came to this, but I don't feel bad about my choices. Your grandfather had years to intervene with Callum, years to demand better behavior, years to protect the people Callum hurt. He chose not to. Now he's dealing with the fallout of those choices. Wednesday brought the arraignment. I didn't attend. Watching Callum stand before a judge would have been satisfying, but I had better ways to spend my time. Instead, I used the day to meet with the victims of Callum's environmental fraud. Families living downstream from the Riverside development where he'd falsified pollution reports. Their stories gutted me. Children with respiratory issues, contaminated well water, cancer clusters that the state health department had been investigating for 2 years without knowing that the source was industrial runoff Callum had deliberately concealed. These weren't abstract legal violations. They were real people, suffering real consequences from my brother's greed. I met with a mother whose 6-year-old had developed severe asthma after they moved into the Riverside development. The doctors keep saying it's environmental, but we couldn't figure out what was causing it, she explained, her voice breaking. We trusted that everything had been inspected, that it was safe. We used our entire savings for the down payment on that house. I gave her my card and the name of an environmental attorney I trusted. File a civil suit. The evidence is documented now. Public record. You have grounds for damages, medical costs, relocation expenses, everything. She looked at the card, then at me. Aren't you his sister? Why are you helping us? Because what he did was wrong. And because being related to someone doesn't mean you defend their crimes. By Thursday, the media had shifted their narrative. Initial reports had focused on the scandal. Prominent families' golden boy charged with massive fraud. But now, features were appearing about the victims, about the contaminated water, about the families who'd lost their life savings to Callum's schemes. One investigative reporter tracked down 3 of the clients he'd embezzled from, elderly investors who'd trusted him with their retirement accounts. The court of public opinion was rendering its verdict, and it was brutal. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the assault, I received a call from Agent Chen. Thought you'd want to know. Your brother's attorney reached out about a plea deal. He's willing to allocate to the embezzlement charges in exchange for dropping the environmental violations. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Those environmental violations affected hundreds of families. He doesn't get to dodge responsibility for that. We weren't planning to accept it anyway, Chen assured me. The EPA is furious. They're pursuing their own charges. Between federal and state, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. 20 years. Callum would be 60 when he got out. His prime years spent in federal prison. His children would grow up visiting their father behind glass. His reputation would never recover. Everything he'd built on lies and theft and arrogance would be ashes. I felt no sympathy. That evening, Rowan and I went to her favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where they knew our order by heart. As we ate, I watched her carefully. The bruise was fading to yellow-green now, less shocking but still visible. She'd been quieter this week, more thoughtful, and I worried about the long-term impact of watching her family implode. Mom, she set down her fork. My therapist says I should be angry at you too, for blowing up the family. Are you? She considered this for a long moment. No, I'm angry at Uncle Callum for being a criminal, and I'm angry at Grandma and Grandpa for not stopping him. But you," she paused, "you just told the truth. That's not the same thing as blowing everything up." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "You're wiser than most adults I know. I get it from you." The weekend brought an unexpected visitor. My father's business partner, Victor, had been largely silent during the investigation, but Saturday morning he appeared at my door with a briefcase and an exhausted expression. "Harper, may I come in? I think we need to talk." I led him to my home office, curious. Victor had always been the quieter partner, the numbers guy, while my father handled relationships and deals. "What can I do for you, Victor? I want you to know that I had no knowledge of Callum's activities," he began. "The offshore accounts, the falsified reports, the embezzlement. I was as shocked as anyone when the FBI showed up. Okay, the board is discussing the company's future. Your father is facing potential criminal charges for negligent oversight. Even if he avoids prosecution, his reputation is destroyed. The company needs new leadership." I understood where this was going. "And you're offering me a position. General counsel, full partner track. The board believes that having someone with your investigative background and ethical standards would help rebuild trust with clients and investors. The salary would be substantial, 3 times what you're making now. 3 times my current salary would be life-changing money. Rowan's college fund, financial security, the kind of stability I'd spent 15 years clawing toward, and all I'd have to do was work alongside the people who'd enabled my brother's crimes, who'd sat silent while he assaulted my daughter." "No," I said. Victor blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said no. "I don't want to work for your company. I don't want to salvage its reputation or rebuild trust with clients. I want to watch it burn to the ground under the weight of its own corruption. Harper, be reasonable. This is a multi-million-dollar opportunity." "I am being reasonable. Your company covered up environmental violations that poisoned children. Your company employed a man who stole millions from elderly clients. Your company, your leadership, created a culture where my brother believed he was untouchable." I stood, walking to the window. "I don't want your money, Victor. I want you to face the consequences of building a business on lies." After he left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the path I'd chosen. My father's company would likely collapse completely. The criminal investigations, the civil lawsuits, the destroyed reputation. There was no coming back from this. My family would lose everything they'd spent decades building, and I felt no regret. Monday morning, 3 weeks after the assault, brought the moment I'd been methodically engineering. The federal prosecutor had scheduled a preliminary hearing where they'd present evidence to support the charges against Callum. Media interest had reached a fever pitch. This wasn't just a white-collar crime story anymore. It was a morality tale about privilege, family, and justice. I dressed carefully that morning, selecting a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car, a subtle but pointed reminder that I'd earned everything I had. Rowan's bruise had finally faded to almost nothing, but I'd photographed its progression meticulously, documenting evidence that might prove useful later. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. I'd deliberately arrived early, wanting to control the narrative before Callum's high-priced defense team could spin their version of events. As cameras swiveled toward me, I stopped and faced them directly. "Miss Harper, you're testifying against your own brother. How do you justify that?" I looked directly into the camera. "My brother committed multiple felonies. He stole from vulnerable people. He falsified environmental reports that endangered hundreds of families, and he physically assaulted my 15-year-old daughter in front of 20 witnesses." I paused, letting that sink in. "I'm not testifying against family. I'm testifying against a criminal who happens to share my DNA. But don't you feel any loyalty?" "I feel loyalty to the truth. I feel loyalty to the victims he harmed. I feel loyalty to a legal system that's supposed to apply equally to everyone, not just to people who can't afford expensive lawyers." I adjusted my briefcase. "If that makes me a bad sister, I can live with that." Inside the courthouse, the gallery was packed. I spotted Jessica in the front row, flanked by her attorneys. Divorce attorneys, I'd heard. Smart woman. My parents sat on the opposite side. My father still pale and diminished from his heart attack. My mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Callum entered in an expensive suit, his legal team surrounding him like a protective barrier. When his eyes met mine, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not the performative concern he'd shown when the FBI first came knocking, but genuine, bone-deep terror. He finally understood that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't going to back down, wasn't going to let family loyalty override justice. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia, had told me she planned to make this preliminary hearing count. "We need to establish not just that crimes were committed, but the scope and scale of his fraudulent activities. The defense will argue that these were isolated incidents, mistakes in judgment. We're going to show a pattern of deliberate, systematic theft and deception." She was better than I'd hoped. Over 4 hours, Patricia methodically presented evidence. Bank records showing the offshore transfers, forged signatures on environmental reports, testimony from the clients Callum had embezzled from, expert witnesses who'd analyzed the falsified documents. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin I'd been building for 3 months. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my head high. Callum's lead attorney, a man named Gregory, who'd made his reputation defending corporate criminals, approached with the kind of condescending smile that told me he thought he could rattle me. Miss Harper, isn't it true that you've had a contentious relationship with your brother for years? We've had disagreements. Yes. And isn't it true that you've always resented his success? His position in the family business? I smiled slightly. I've never resented success that's earned through legitimate work. What I resent is fraud. Gregory's smile tightened. You claim you investigated him as part of your professional duties for Meridian Holdings, but you never disclosed to your employer that the subject of your investigation was your own brother. Doesn't that suggest a conflict of interest? I disclosed it immediately upon identifying the CFO as my brother. Meridian Holdings reviewed the potential conflict and determined that given the severity of the findings, my personal connection was irrelevant. They wanted the truth, not family loyalty. How convenient that your investigation concluded just hours before your brother allegedly assaulted your daughter. The timing was coincidental, and there's nothing alleged about the assault. There were 20 witnesses. 20 witnesses who saw an argument between family members that got slightly heated. I leaned forward, my voice cold. There were 20 witnesses who watched a grown man grab a 15-year-old girl, shake her violently, shove her to the ground hard enough to tear her dress and bruise her shoulder, and then stand there mocking her while she cried. If that's your definition of slightly heated, I'd hate to see what you consider actual violence. Gregory tried a different angle. Isn't it true that you're seeking $5 million in civil damages from your brother? That this is really about money? I'm seeking $5 million in damages, because that's what my attorney calculated as appropriate compensation for the physical assault, emotional trauma, and intentional infliction of emotional distress my daughter suffered. The money will go into a trust for her future therapy and education, since she'll likely need both after being attacked by her uncle. Future therapy? Isn't that a bit dramatic? She had some bruises. She had a dislocated shoulder, facial contusions, and has been diagnosed with PTSD by a licensed psychologist. I pulled out the medical records I'd brought specifically for this moment. Would you like to see the photographs of her injuries? They're quite detailed. Gregory stepped back, recognizing he'd overplayed his hand. The judge had been watching this exchange with increasing displeasure, and when Patricia stood to redirect, she went for the throat. Miss Harper, in your professional opinion as a forensic investigator, were the crimes your brother committed isolated incidents? No. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of theft and fraud spanning at least 7 years, possibly longer. The offshore accounts were established in 2017. The environmental violations began with the Riverside development in 2018. The embezzlement from client accounts started in 2019 and continued until last month. This wasn't a mistake or lapse in judgment. This was a deliberate, sustained criminal enterprise. And in discovering this evidence, did you ever consider covering it up to protect your family? I looked directly at Callum. No, not for a single second, because protecting criminals, even family members, makes you complicit in their crimes. And I won't be complicit in harming innocent people to preserve a family reputation built on lies. During the lunch recess, my mother cornered me in the hallway. How can you sit there and destroy him like this? He's your brother, Harper. Your own blood. He destroyed himself, I replied. I just documented it. Your father is heartbroken. He built that company from nothing, and you're watching it crumble with what looks like satisfaction. I studied her carefully. This woman who'd spent my entire childhood prioritizing appearances over truth. Tell me, Mother, when exactly should I have shown mercy? When Callum stole the first $1 million? The second? The third? When he falsified reports that poisoned children? Or should I have waited until he attacked someone else's daughter instead of mine? She had no answer for that. The afternoon session brought the environmental violations to center stage. The EPA had sent their own representatives, and their testimony was devastating. Maps showing contamination spreading from the Riverside development, medical records from families living downstream, expert analysis of the falsified reports that Callum had submitted, comparing them to actual environmental testing. One of the victims testified, the mother I'd met with earlier, whose son had developed severe asthma. She described their dream of moving to a safe, clean neighborhood, of trusting that the development had passed all environmental inspections. She described her 6-year-old's first trip to the emergency room, the terror of watching him struggle to breathe. She described the mounting medical bills, the specialists, the treatments that weren't covered by insurance. Did you ever suspect that the developer had falsified environmental reports? Patricia asked. Never. We trusted that the law required proper testing, proper oversight. We had no idea that someone could just lie on official documents and no one would check. She looked directly at Callum. My son almost died because you wanted to save money on proper waste disposal. How do you sleep at night? Callum's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The gallery murmured, and I saw several jurors taking notes. Even the judge looked disgusted. By the time the hearing concluded, the prosecution had established overwhelming probable cause for all charges. The judge set bail at $2 million, far more than Callum could afford with his assets frozen, and ordered him remanded to custody pending trial. As federal marshals led him away in handcuffs, Callum turned one last time to look at me. There was no arrogance now, No mocking superiority. Just the dawning realization that I'd systematically destroyed every aspect of his life, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I gathered my briefcase and walked out of the courthouse into a wall of camera flashes. Reporters shouted questions, but I kept walking until I reached my car. Only when I was safely inside, doors locked, did I let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. My phone buzzed. A text from Rowan. Saw the news. Are you okay? I typed back, better than okay. Justice is being served. Because that's what this was. Ultimately. Not revenge, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't satisfaction in watching Callum fall. Not family drama, though the media would spin it that way. This was justice. Imperfect, messy, painful justice for everyone it touched, but justice nonetheless. That evening, Victor called again. The board held an emergency meeting. Your father is stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The company is filing for bankruptcy reorganization. Everything he built is gone, Harper. Good, I said simply. How can you say that? Hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. Clients will lose millions. The entire real estate market in 3 counties will be disrupted. Then maybe they should have built their business on legitimate practices instead of fraud and corruption. Maybe they should have created a culture where people like Callum couldn't operate with impunity for 7 years. Maybe they should have cared more about doing the right thing than about protecting their golden boy. I hung up before he could respond. Rowan was doing homework at the kitchen table when I got home. She looked up, studying my face carefully. Mom, are you sure you're okay? You look, I don't know, different. I sat down across from her. I'm tired, baby, but I'm good. Today was hard, but necessary. The kids at school have been weird. Some of them think it's cool that my mom took down a corrupt company. Others think I'm the reason my family fell apart. What do you think? She considered this. I think Uncle Callum fell apart all by himself. You just made sure everyone could see it. At 15, my daughter understood what my parents never would. That truth matters more than comfort. That justice matters more than family loyalty. And that sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the rightest thing to do. The preliminary hearing had been a preview of the trial to come, and Callum's legal team knew they were outmatched. Within 48 hours, they came back with a revised plea offer: 15 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, permanent disbarment from any financial services position, and allocation to all charges, including the environmental violations. Patricia called to get my input. It's a good deal. Saves the victims from having to testify at trial, guarantees he serves significant time, and avoids the risk of a jury being swayed by expensive defense tactics. What about the civil suits? He'll be financially destroyed. Between the criminal restitution and the civil damages, he'll spend the rest of his life in debt. His wife is divorcing him and going after their shared assets. His reputation is ruined. Even after he gets out of prison, he'll be unemployable in any professional capacity. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. Tell him I'll support the plea deal on one condition. He makes a public statement allocating to every single crime, specifically naming the victims he harmed, and acknowledging that his sister's investigation was thorough and accurate. That's humiliating. That's the point. The plea hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and in the intervening time, the civil lawsuits multiplied like bacteria. The families from Riverside filed a class action. Callum's embezzlement victims filed individual suits. Even former employees of my father's company, claiming they'd lost retirement benefits due to the fraud, joined the legal assault. I'd filed my own suit for Rowan's assault, but I'd done something unusual. I'd requested that the trial be public and televised. Most assault cases involving minors were sealed to protect the victim, but Rowan had made a brave decision after discussing it with her therapist. I want people to see what he did, she'd said. I want other kids who get hurt by family members to know they can speak up, that they don't have to protect people who hurt them just because they're relatives. The judge had agreed, impressed by Rowan's maturity and clarity of purpose. The trial was set for 6 weeks out, after the criminal plea, but something happened in the meantime that I hadn't anticipated. Jessica reached out, asking to meet. We sat in a neutral coffee shop, 2 women whose lives had been irrevocably altered by one man's choices. She looked exhausted, older than her 35 years, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer clothes. I wanted to apologize, she began, for not intervening that night, for not protecting Rowan, for enabling Callum all these years. I sipped my coffee, studying her. What changed? My lawyer showed me the evidence, all of it. The offshore accounts I didn't know existed. The environmental violations, the embezzlement. I've been married to him for 8 years and I had no idea who he really was. She twisted her wedding ring. She was still wearing it. Or maybe I did know and chose not to see. That's what my therapist says. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm testifying against him in the civil suits. I want you to know that I'm not standing by him anymore. And I wanted to ask, she paused, gathering courage. I want to apologize to Rowan personally. If she'll let me. I thought about it. I'll ask her, but I won't pressure her either way. Fair enough. Jessica stood to leave, then turned back. Your mother came to see me last week. She wanted me to convince you to drop the criminal charges. Said you were destroying the family out of spite. I told her that the family destroyed itself the moment it decided protecting Callum was more important than protecting the people he hurt. That night, I told Rowan about Jessica's request. She thought about it for a long time, then nodded. Yeah, I'll meet with her. She was always nice to me before all this, and maybe she's a victim too. in a different way. My daughter's capacity for compassion never ceased to amaze me. The meeting happened at our house, neutral territory where Rowan felt safe. Jessica brought no gifts, no attempts to buy forgiveness, just herself, and an honesty that was clearly painful. Rowan, I'm so sorry I didn't help you that night. I've spent every day since trying to understand how I could have just stood there. I think she swallowed hard. I think I'd gotten so used to ignoring Callum's bad behavior, making excuses for him, that I'd trained myself not to see it even when it was right in front of me. Rowan nodded slowly. Mom says people can get trapped in patterns they don't even realize they're in. Your mom is very wise. Jessica looked at me, then back to Rowan. I'm divorcing him, and I'm going to make sure my kids understand that what their father did was wrong. That being family doesn't mean you defend people who hurt others. The plea hearing arrived with minimal fanfare. The media had moved on to newer scandals, though a few dedicated reporters remained to document Callum's fall from grace. I sat in the gallery with Rowan beside me, my daughter's presence a reminder of why I'd started this journey. Callum looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit, the cocky arrogance completely gone. When the judge asked him to allocate to the charges, his voice was barely audible. I plead guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of embezzlement, 4 counts of filing false environmental reports, and 1 count of assault and battery. I stole approximately $2 million from clients who trusted me. I falsified environmental reports that resulted in contamination affecting over 200 families. I physically assaulted my 15-year-old niece during a family dinner. He paused, his lawyer prompting him to continue. My sister Harper's investigation was thorough and accurate. Everything she documented was true. I betrayed my family, my clients, and the law. The judge accepted the plea and pronounced sentence: 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Callum would be 53 when he was released. His prime years gone, his reputation irredeemable. As they led him away, my mother broke down sobbing. My father sat stone-faced, a man who'd built an empire only to watch his son destroy it. I felt nothing. No triumph, no sadness, just a quiet certainty that justice had been served. The civil trial for Rowan's assault was different. This was personal, visceral, and I'd prepared for it like I prepared for the biggest cases of my career. My attorney was a woman named Diana who specialized in assault cases, and together we built a presentation that would make the jury see exactly what Callum had done. We had medical records, photographs of Rowan's injuries at various stages of healing, testimony from the 20 witnesses who'd watched the assault happen. But more powerful than any of that was Rowan herself, taking the stand with quiet courage that made several jurors wipe their eyes. He grabbed me here, she demonstrated, touching her shoulders, and shook me really hard. My head was snapping back and forth and I couldn't get my balance. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. Then he pushed me and I fell. I remember my dress tearing and feeling the floor hit my shoulder. It hurt so bad I thought I was going to throw up. What was your grandmother doing during this? Diana asked gently. Nothing. She was just sitting there. My grandpa too. Everyone was just watching. What did your uncle say while he was hurting you? Rowan's voice got smaller. He said Mom and I were trailer trash playing dress up, that we were nothing, that I shouldn't act smart because I was pathetic just like her. And what did your mother do? For the first time, Rowan smiled slightly. She stayed really calm. She helped me up and checked my arm. Then she put this envelope on the table and we left. I didn't know what was in it then, but later she told me it was evidence that Uncle Callum had been stealing money and breaking laws. The defense attorney tried to paint Callum as stressed and intoxicated, as if that excused assaulting a child. He tried to suggest that Rowan was exaggerating the severity of the attack. Diana destroyed him on cross-examination by simply playing the security footage we'd subpoenaed from my parents' home system. The jury watched in silence as Callum cornered Rowan, grabbed her, shook her, shoved her. The footage had no sound, but you could see Rowan's head snapping back, see her stumble and fall, see the moment her dress tore. You could see my parents and the other relatives sitting frozen. You could see me stand up, slowly and deliberately, and place an envelope on the table. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes before awarding Rowan $5 million in damages. The look on Callum's face, he'd been brought from prison to attend, was almost worth more than the money. But the real victory came 2 days later, when the bankruptcy court finished liquidating my father's company. The final tally was brutal. The company sold for pennies on the dollar, the proceeds going to pay criminal restitution and civil judgments. My parents' house was foreclosed on, their investment accounts drained. Even my mother's jewelry collection was seized and auctioned. Victor called one last time. I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed 3 generations of work. Your family's legacy is in ruins. My family's legacy was built on fraud and covered in blood, I replied. I'm glad it's in ruins. Maybe something honest can grow from the ashes. The final piece fell into place a month after the civil trial. The EPA finished their investigation and announced criminal charges against my father for knowingly allowing environmental violations to continue. He took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison, though at his age and with his health problems, everyone knew he'd likely die before completing the sentence. My mother called, desperate and broken. Harper, please. Your father is dying. Can't you show mercy? Can't you forgive us? Forgiveness is for people who show remorse, who take responsibility, who change. I said. Dad had years to stop Callum, years to demand better. He chose not to. Now he's facing consequences. That's not my fault. You've destroyed us. Destroyed everything. Was it worth it? I thought about Rowan, who no longer woke up with nightmares, who'd started a support group at school for kids dealing with family trauma, who'd been accepted to a prestigious summer program for young activists, who looked at me with pride instead of fear. Yes, I said simply. It was worth it. 2 years have passed since that dinner, since Callum grabbed Rowan and set in motion his own destruction. The world looks different now, reshaped by truth and consequences. I accepted a position with a major firm in Chicago, heading their white-collar crime investigation division. The bonus from the Meridian case was just the beginning. My reputation as someone who won't be intimidated by powerful families or complex financial schemes has made me one of the most sought-after investigators in the Midwest. Last year alone, my cases resulted in 12 successful prosecutions and over $50 million in recovered funds for victims. Rowan is 17 now, confident and passionate about justice in a way that makes me both proud and grateful. She speaks at conferences about family violence, about the courage it takes to hold people accountable even when they're relatives. She's been accepted early admission to Northwestern, planning to study law with a focus on victim advocacy. The $5 million from the civil suit sits in a trust, funding her education and her activism. We live in a beautiful home now, nothing extravagant but comfortable, filled with light and laughter and safety. Sometimes I think about the trailer Callum accused us of living in, and I smile. We never lived in a trailer, but even if we had, it wouldn't have diminished our worth. What diminishes worth is choosing cruelty, choosing theft, choosing violence. Callum is in year 2 of his 15-year sentence. I receive occasional updates. He's working in the prison library, apparently, teaching other inmates to read. Jessica tells me he writes letters begging for forgiveness, for a chance to explain, for understanding. She never responds. Neither do I. My father died 8 months into his sentence, his heart finally giving out under the weight of all he'd lost. My mother attended the funeral alone. I chose not to go. She's living now in a small apartment, working as a receptionist at a medical office. Having lost everything else, she still sends cards on Rowan's birthday, on holidays. We don't respond to those either. Some people say I'm cold, unforgiving, heartless. Let them say it. I know the truth. I'm someone who chose justice over comfort, who refused to let family loyalty become complicity in harm. I'm someone who documented crimes instead of covering them up, who protected victims instead of protecting reputations. The families from Riverside won their class action lawsuit. The settlement funded the cleanup of the contaminated watershed and provided medical monitoring for every affected resident. The little boy with asthma is breathing easier now, his mother told me at the settlement hearing. She thanked me with tears in her eyes for refusing to let Callum's crimes stay hidden. That's what I think about when people criticize my choices. Not Callum in his prison cell, though I won't pretend his suffering bothers me. Not my parents in their diminished circumstances, though I feel no guilt for their fall. I think about that little boy breathing easier, about the elderly investors who recovered their stolen retirement funds, about Rowan, standing tall and unafraid, using her voice to help others. Last week, a new case came across my desk. A prominent banker suspected of embezzling from client accounts, environmental violations at a development project, falsified reports, and a pattern of behavior that looked disturbingly familiar. The banker's family has already started calling, asking me to go easy, to remember that everyone deserves a second chance, to consider the damage a full investigation might do. I smiled as I opened the case file. Some people never learn. Rowan asked me once if I ever regretted it, if I ever wished I'd just stayed quiet and kept the peace. We were sitting on our back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Not for a second, I told her. Protecting you, protecting the truth, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not something to regret. That's something to be proud of. Even though it cost you your family, I looked at her, this brave, brilliant young woman I'd raised alone, and I shook my head. It didn't cost me my family, baby. You're my family, the people who showed up when I needed them, who supported us through the investigation and the trials and the aftermath. They're my family. Blood relation doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. Love does. Integrity does. She nodded, understanding in a way that my mother never could. Uncle Callum wrote me another letter. From prison. What did it say? That he's sorry. That he was wrong, that he hopes someday I can forgive him. She twisted the letter in her hands. Should I write back? That's your choice, sweetheart. But remember that apologies mean nothing without changed behavior. And from prison, there's no way to demonstrate changed behavior. He's sorry because he's facing consequences, not because he genuinely understands the harm he caused. Rowan tore the letter in half, then quarters, then eighths. I'm not interested in his apologies. I'm interested in making sure other kids don't have to go through what I did. That's my daughter. That's my legacy. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I pour a glass of wine and review the case files from that investigation, remembering the moment I discovered each piece of evidence, each forged signature, each illegal transfer. I remember the cold clarity I felt, understanding that I held my brother's fate in my hands and choosing truth over family loyalty. People say revenge is hollow. that it doesn't bring satisfaction, they're wrong. What I did wasn't revenge, it was justice. And justice feels exactly like it should. Clean, righteous, and permanent. Callum has 13 more years in federal prison. My father is dead. My mother is broken. Their company is dissolved. Their reputation destroyed, their legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about corruption and consequences. And me? I'm thriving. My career is flourishing. My daughter is brilliant and strong. We have a beautiful life built on honesty and hard work, and the kind of integrity that can't be bought or faked or compromised. When Rowan graduates from Northwestern in 5 years, I'll sit in the audience and watch her walk across that stage. And I'll know that every difficult choice I made was worth it. Every relationship I lost, every family member who turned against me, every accusation of cruelty or heartlessness, worth it. Because that little girl who showed up on my doorstep when she was born, that little girl whose father abandoned her, that little girl who watched her uncle assault her and her family do nothing, she deserves a mother who taught her that right matters more than easy, that justice matters more than peace, that holding people accountable, even family, is how we create a world worth living in. Callum wanted me to sign that mortgage guarantee. He thought he could bully me into risking everything I'd built to subsidize his fraudulent lifestyle. He thought family obligation would override my judgment, my ethics, my understanding of right and wrong. He learned otherwise, and the lesson cost him everything. Good. Some people deserve to lose everything. Some people deserve to spend years in prison, contemplating the wreckage of their choices. Some people deserve to have their golden child status stripped away, their privileges revoked, their crimes exposed for the world to see. Callum was one of those people, and I don't regret a single thing I did to ensure he faced exactly what he deserved. The sun is setting as I finish writing this, casting long shadows across my home office. In the other room, I can hear Rowan on a video call with her advocacy group, planning their next awareness campaign. Her voice is strong, confident, passionate. She's becoming exactly who she's meant to be. And I'm exactly who I'm meant to be too. Someone who chose justice when it was hard, who protected the vulnerable when it cost me everything, who documented truth instead of preserving comfortable lies. My phone rings. Another case. Another family trying to protect a criminal relative. Another opportunity to show that money and connections and family name don't put you above the law. I answer with a smile. This is what I do now. This is who I am, and I've never been happier.